KQEG and Seven Rivers Sports. We tape the show each week in our downtown studios here in La Crosse. I'm your host, Terry Erickson, and each week we talk about wellness, fitness, sports, all the things that you enjoy watching here each and every week. Well, today the topic is fitness and running. Pretty appropriate as we embark on the road racing season. Our guests, Jim Stenulson and Amy Zitelow. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Despite the dismal weather that we see in April, like we saw last year, the road racing season is upon us. I just returned from a trail race in Arizona, and last weekend the Crazy Lake, so all of us are getting excited for running, and you just returned from the 118th running of the most popular race in the world, the Boston Marathon. So we're glad you're back safely. And the article in the paper, I'm sure a lot of our viewers saw this, Defying Terror, because that's exactly what it was from 2013. But before we talk about that, let's talk about how you got involved in running. And you both had interesting stories, starting with you, Jim.
Well, back in 1978, I was going to school at UWL here, and some friends and I decided to train for the Oktoberfest half marathon. And we were going to train all summer and then run the half marathon, and instead none of us trained, and we did it in a month instead of all summer. And we all made the half marathon, but we didn't really know what we were doing. I had some really bad shoes, some $8 Kmart shoes, and I was limping around pretty bad for several months, before I could even walk without pain after that.
We're going to talk about the importance of apparel and good shoes later on, but Amy, of course, you, and I've known you forever, your family, who inspired you to run? I know you started in 2005.
Yes, I did, and I had been doing a lot of walking just for exercise, and my friend Trish LaFay told me, well, if you're walking that much, you could certainly start running. And so she actually took me out to Hickson Forest, and we ran a mile without stopping, and that was really the beginning for me.
So that was the inspiration to you? Thought, if I can go a mile, I can maybe go a lot further.
Right, well, and I set my goal to do my first race, which was a 5K, and at that time that felt like a long distance. And it's really, I downloaded Hal Higdon's, beginner 5K race plan, and just went from there, and it just takes you in baby steps, basically. But Trish was my inspiration. She's the one that said that I could do it, and I thought, well, if you can do it, I can do it. So that's how it started.
Did you both, starting with you Jim, and I know you went to Alma Center, and I referee in that area quite a bit, and our show was broadcast in that area. And did you have that inspiration to be an athlete when you were in high school?
I was a very bad wrestler, but I did like sports. I mean, I like doing things at our breaks during school, lunch hour. We'd always be playing basketball or football. I was doing something, and I remember running steps for wrestling. We'd run down the hallway and the steps at either end, and I felt like I'd go forever. So I had an inkling back then that I could run, but I never ran track, and we never had cross country, but. And I always thought of myself as being slow, actually. But
and you both look fit, too, and the residual effect of running certainly shows in both of you. Not only those beautiful jackets they have on from the Boston Marathon, but just your overall, you look very, very healthy. And I assume you were an athlete, too, in high school, Amy.
I was really not so much. Maybe my senior year of high school, I went out for track, which... that was the only sport that I did in high school. So I did just shorter distances, sprints, and then I was more involved with music, piano playing.
So you won a period of several years where you didn't really get into fitness at all.
Right. I really was not doing anything except walking, and so running, that's changed in 2005.
I know there's lots of different kinds of races, and I've been involved in several of them. My kids are all runners and so on. But a lot of people ask and are curious as to the difference between trail runs and road races, and how you not only the difference, but how you prepare and train for those. Amy?
I've only done one trail race, and that was a couple years ago. We did a desert run in Vegas, and We were actually preparing to run a half marathon, and the trail race that we did was a 10K, and I found it to be a lot more difficult to run a trail race than, you know, a regular 10K. It felt like we had run a half marathon, but it was, you know, a lot of uneven terrain and, you know, going up and down a lot. So
I experienced the same thing in Arizona last Saturday, where I struggled in one of my first trail runs. Jim, have you had any of those experiences?
Well, most of the trail runs, the races I've done are longer distances, 50K, 50 mile. So that's a little bit different. I mean, the trail tends to be easier on your body, and that distance you go a lot easier pace. You walk. But because of the terrain, you'll maybe walk hills. When you walk when you feel like walking, and you stop at aid stations and refuel. So it's I always feel more beat up after a road race, after a marathon, after pounding on the concrete for 26 miles. You feel so much better after coming off a trail run. And I know the shorter distances are tougher to try to race. If you're pushing like you do in a 5K, and a trail is going to be a lot tougher.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know the benefits of running, walking, being fit, and so on. We're going to get into that a little bit. But a lot of experts talk about the importance of cross-training, too. And I try to do that during the winter months when I'm kind of a softie, so I don't get outside during the cold winter. I go to the gym and work out in different ways, and I've tried yoga and so on now. But talk about your training routine with cross-training, Amy.
Well, I too agree that it's, you know, running alone is you know, good exercise, but when you combine some cross training with weights and yoga, that helps a lot. So that my routine basically was I would run 3 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week. I would strength train 1 day a week. I would do stretching with yoga, and that was basically my routine. And some of the different, it wasn't just go out and run 5 miles or run 10 miles. The plan that I used involved some interval training and some hill training, because Boston's filled with hills. So I never felt bored with my training. So there's always something different every day.
I know a lot of elite athletes like you two have what's called high-performance coaches that sort of monitor and develop their training routine and regimen. Do you have that?
My personal trainer is Carol Baruch from the Y, and she really helped prepare me just with the different weight training that we did for the Boston Marathon.
I know, Jim, are you an advocate of cross-training?
I am. I don't do it, but it's a good idea. I do bike, and I do some biking in the summer, but I haven't taken up the cross-training so much in the winter. But so I managed to get by, I guess. But I know I have friends that do more. It does benefit them.
How about, let's talk about injuries for a minute. I've said this on the show before that I have a sciatica issue that's better now since I've tried yoga and done more stretching. But it's been a struggle on some of the half marathons that I've run. Talk about, have you stayed pretty much injury-free, and talk about the injury factor as an elite runner?
Well, at the end of the Boston Marathon last year, I came back with a lot of lower back issues, and I think it was just the constant pounding of training that finally caught up. And so I went to see a chiropractor, and I mean, at that time, I couldn't even run 3 miles without pain. And so the chiropractic helped, the stretching, you know, continued with my weight training. And I basically, I mean, I had no issues with it during the marathon this year.
You know, I talked to a lot of elite runners. Bob Schmidt is a good friend of mine from Schmitty's, and he is an advocate of yoga. And so I tried that in Arizona. 3 days when I was out there, I went to early morning yoga classes. Now I'm convinced that is certainly a factor in helping you stretch. Jim? I
have a friend, John Blanchard. You probably have heard of him. He does yoga, and he's over 60, and he's just a great athlete. He's still burning up the ultras, and that seems to help him. And I've had other friends that do it too that says it helps a lot. You
know, a few weeks ago we had 2 people from the yoga on the north side, root down yoga, and talking about the benefits of yoga. And hot yoga in particular. Have you tried some of that stuff too?
I have not tried an official yoga class ever. I have it downloaded from the internet that I use. Mm-hmm. So I just do it at home. But I've heard about the root down, and it'd be fun to try.
What about the benefits as we approach our halftime break here? What about the benefits of stretching prior to your run and after, Jim?
We tend to do it after. Our typical way to do it is to just start slow with a run and then do the stretching afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And any set routine for you, Amy?
That's what I do too. I don't stretch too much beforehand.
Okay, okay. I don't usually either too much because I'm usually the last one to get there before a race starts, which has been a lot of my family kids me about that. But well, this has been interesting. We're going to take a little bit of a halftime break while you get a glass of Gatorade and come back for the second half of the show. So we'll be right back after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back to the second half of Seven Rivers Sports with Jim Stenulson and with Amy Zitelow, just returning from the Boston Marathon. Pretty special to have them on our show today. First half of the show, we talk a little bit about the history of your involvement in running, and I know oftentimes running is a family sport too, like it is with you, Amy.
Yes, my husband and I enjoy running together. Our daughter and our son are runners as well, and they were actually all with me at the marathon this year.
Wow, that was special, huh?
Mm-hmm. It was great.
And I know with you, Jim, you've been an inspiration for one of your sons, too.
Yeah, Brandon took a liking for the trails last year, and he did his first 50K. I think he did that before he even had done a marathon or a half marathon. He jumped right up to the big stuff. And my older son, he's doing some running just to get himself into shape, too. He's put on a few pounds. So he's doing some running to lose some weight.
Good. Well, I know besides your dedication to fitness and modeling wellness, you have a day job, too.
Yes. I am a Mary Kay sales director. I've been doing that for 23 years, and I love it. So
You kind of resemble a Mary Kay person, I'll tell you.
Thank you.
And Jim, I know you're a dedicated employee, too.
Yes, I've been at Bethany Lutheran Homes for 30 years, most of that in maintenance. I work at Bethany on Cass, which is assisted living, and then we have some buildings up in home in Bethany Heights. We have assisted living and Alzheimer's and independent apartments up there. So
when you go to those other satellite buildings, do you run or do you take your car?
I do a lot of walking when I get there, but I don't run there. No.
You know, a lot of people talk about the benefits of nutrition, and you know, you can be a runner, but if you do all the other bad things, you know, you maybe your choices are bad with alcohol, and your sleeping patterns are disrupted, and your eating habits are not good. It doesn't really provide the benefits, does it? Mm-mm. Amy, talk about your commitment to nutrition.
Well, I believe that nutrition is very important, like you said, and if you're wondering, like pre-race or just in general?
In general.
In general. Yeah, just, a balanced diet of, healthy proteins and healthy carbs, and cutting out junk food and sodas, soft drinks, drinking lots of water. And I don't do too much of the Gatorade until closer to the race, and some longer distances. Otherwise, it's a lot of, lots of water.
Do you have is there an absolute ritual that you subscribe to on race day?
On race day, well, even backing it up like 2 days before the race, we do our pasta 2 days before the race. My friend's running coach actually suggested that. Usually, I think some people do it the night before, but we do ours the 2 days before. And then the night before, we do, he recommends doing steak and a healthy carb.
Really?
I kind of raised my eyebrows to that too.
Gosh, I have not heard that before.
I was actually, last year I felt a little nervous about doing the steak before, so I did chicken, and that still was good too. And this year I thought, I'm going to try the steak and a healthy carb, and worked out really well. And then, just a couple days before too, we're sipping more on Gatorade and water, a combination just to keep the electrolytes and the glycogen stores in our system.
And since you've become an accomplished elite runner, Jim, do I presume that your diet has changed?
Sometimes. People tend to think that I can, because you run, they say, well, you can just eat anything because you'll run it off, and it's not true. I struggle with putting some extra pounds on, and that's one of the reasons I maybe didn't have the best race this Boston. I was have some extra weight on me from stacking on sweets a little bit too much, but I know it did help. I had a year where I ran very well, and I watched my diet better then and kept the weight lower, and it does help a lot to watch your diet.
Well, let's spend the rest of the show talking about the Boston Marathon, and as we talked at the beginning, your medals you brought with you, and we appreciate that, and your jackets, and I mean, it is an accomplishment that very many dream of, including me, and very few achieve. But let's go back to 2013. You and I know those are probably unpleasant memories, starting with you, Amy, but talk about that particular terror that you experienced.
Yeah, it was definitely not expected. We started out the day very excited to be there and to run, and right around, my friend and I, Jen Marr and I, planned to run together and stay together. And right around mile 12, her IT band started hurting a lot, and so we slowed our pace. And we, of course, came to Heartbreak Hill, mile 21, which is where our families were, and still we had not heard anything of what had happened at the end of the race. By the time we got to mile 25.8, we were stopped, and still we're wondering why we were stopped, and someone said what had happened, and it just became very chaotic. We never saw anything at the end of the finish line, thankful for that, but we did see a lot of chaos, and just the Boston police in action. They were so efficient with dealing with everything. We also came across complete strangers that gave us food, gave us each a coat off their back. It was cold that day, chilly, and just when you finish a race, just you feel very chilled at that point too. And even though we were about a mile away from our hotel, it took us 2 hours to get back to our hotel and to reunite with our families.
Was that chaotic?
That was very chaotic because they had blocked off roads, and they were afraid that another bomb was there.
Yes.
And so the police were just on edge, very much so too.
And I know your experiences too last year with a friend of mine, Deb Marcus, were kind of an inspiration for you, Jim, to return again this year.
Yeah, I think all of us were more determined to come back because of what happened last year, just to show that, that wasn't going to scare us away. I think everybody, all the runners I talked to that could get out there wanted to. I had finished, before the bombs went off and was away from the area, but it was just hectic trying to track everybody down because I had friends that were watching and friends still on the course, and of course Deb was, she happened to be right by where the explosions happened when it happened.
36,000 runners from 96 countries, and the winner, the first time since, I believe, 1985, an American from California won the men, and then the women, I believe it was somebody from Kenya, but times were very impressive. The men's time, 2 hours and 18 minutes, and the women not too far behind. I mean, pretty impressive, but you had impressive experiences this year too, and you told me about some of yours.
Yes, and my friend Jen and I ran again this year. We were invited back because we did not finish last year, and we had a great experience. Just being on the course, a million spectators cheering us on was awesome. My friend, once again this year, had an issue with a side ache, so we, and our theme together, and you saw it all over Boston, was we run together. We run as one, Boston strong. And so it's like we run together, and that was our plan, to run together again. So we stayed together. We slowed our pace once again. After she got a side ache at mile 4, and so for 22 miles she ran through that pain. We did become separated a little bit at mile 21, but I stopped and waited, and then we finished.
So you finished together. How emotional.
Together.
People talk about the runner's high, and I had an article in the paper recently referencing that, along with helper's high. Those that volunteer get that high too, but did you experience that runner's high?
Oh, for sure, we did. And coming to the point where we were stopped last year at mile 25.8, And that's been vivid in our minds this whole time since, just imagining where we had stopped. And then passing that point was very emotional. And then going down through the tunnel, and the crowds were greater this year at the final 4 miles than they were last year. And just the deafening crowd, and even police cheering us on, and Homeland Security cheering us on, and then finally seeing that finish line come into view was a wonderful sight.
I know it was symbolic for an American to win this year, and it was symbolic for you, Jim, to return from last year's setback and return and talk about your experiences.
Well, I struggled a bit this year. I like I said, I was a little bit out of shape, I think, but the crowds were amazing. I mean, I think it maybe got me going a little bit too fast early on, went out at a fast pace, and then about mile 7 realized it was going to be a long day. And I lost the friend that I stopped to do a goo, and the friend I was running with, I said, go ahead, I'm not going to be with you. But I was determined at the end. Other years I've been out there, I've just run down the middle, down Boylston Street at the finish, and this year I just felt I wanted to be by the crowd. So I went down Boylston giving 5s, Hereford Street too. I just gave, I just said, don't worry about the time, I'm just going to enjoy it. And I gave high 5s to everybody down Hereford and Boylston, as many people as I could reach. And I guess that was my runner's high. And then, of course, making it to the finish again.
Did you, a lot of people struggle with Heartbreak Hill and kind of hit the wall at that point. I know, Amy, you talked about there are several hills.
Yes.
And we have a daughter that's training to compete next year, and hopefully she qualifies, and we'll all be out there as a family supporting her. Talk about getting to Heartbreak Hill.
Well, there's a series of, I believe it's 5 hills, the Newton Hills, which are pretty large rolling hills, and then Heartbreak Hill is the final hill, which is a mile-long steady climb, and it is very challenging. But like Jim said, there's people all along that course that are cheering you on. My friend and I actually write our names in permanent marker on our arms. Still have a tattoo from that, sunburn. But they are cheering you on, they're screaming your name and high-fiving you, and they really make you feel like you are their star quarterback with how loud they cheer.
And you had an emotional, if you could just briefly share with us, the emotional scarf project at the old church.
At the Old South Church, the Church of the Finish Line, it's right there, and they had enlisted people from their congregation and then across the country and even beyond to make these blue and gold scarves, marathon blue and gold, that they presented to the runners. And our family was walking around a couple days prior to the race and saw people walking with these scarves, and we were wondering what that was, and I thought, well, I'd like to purchase one because it was chilly. And so we found out where they were, and they said, no, these are for those of you who ran last year and who are running this year. And when they presented them to us, he said, may you be wrapped in warmth and love and courage, and we're cheering you on, and it just was a really special moment.
Wow, that sends thrills up my spine just hearing you say that. And Jim, I know you are president of the River City Running Club too, which inspires a lot of people. Share a little bit about that briefly with our viewers.
Well, a good thing about the club is it kind of keeps you running through the winter, the tough times in the winter. It's a lot easier to get out there if you know somebody's going to be there to run with, and that's the main advantage of it. In fact, I hardly run on my own anymore. I always look forward to that time with my friends and getting those long runs, and especially the longer runs. It really helps to have somebody to share those with.
Well, good. Well, this has been a great show. Part of the mission of this particular show, Seven River Sports, is to inspire others to do things. You've inspired our viewers today. You've inspired me. And you've brought a lot of color to our set, that's for sure. So the country may have the Frank Shorters of the world, the Dr. Ken Coopers, and the Dr. George Sheehan, and those are role models. But in lacrosse, we have Jim Stenulson and we have Amy Zitelow as our heroes. So we're really happy that you were with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back for some closing comments right after this. Welcome back to Seven Rivers Sports. I trust you were inspired today when you got to meet our guests, Jim Stenulson and Amy Zitelow, just returning from the Boston Marathon. Inspiring, to say the least. Well, weather has not been very conducive for spring sports, both at the high school and the college level during the month of April. Hopefully in May, things will turn around. We are following the progress of those teams and will keep you updated in our shows throughout the month of May. We hope you have plans to take advantage of some of the fitness events in the Cooley region in the upcoming months. Running, walking, biking, all these opportunities are plentiful for people to take advantage of to upgrade and enhance your fitness. As always, we appreciate your support by watching us each and every week here on Seven Rivers Sports. I'm your host, Terry Erickson, hoping that you will have an active and a healthy week ahead. So long from all of us here at Seven Rivers Sports.